Chapter 5. 3 days had passed since Arya had blocked Marcus's number. 3 days of going through the motions of living while feeling like her heart had been carved out of her chest. She worked her shifts at Murphy's in a haze, served coffee and eggs to customers whose faces blurred together, and came home each night to an apartment that felt haunted by memories of laughter, cooking smells, and the warm presence of a man who'd made her believe in possibilities. Rosie seemed to sense something was wrong. The baby had been fussier than usual, crying when Arya tried to put her down, clinging to her with tiny fists that somehow conveyed desperation. Even now, as Arya sat in her darkened living room at nearly midnight, Rosie slept restlessly in her arms, occasionally whimpering as if she missed Marcus too. Arya stared out her window at the city lights, wondering what Marcus was doing, whether he thought about her at all, whether Vivian had already sunk her perfectly manicured claws deeper into him. The thought made her stomach churn with a combination of heartbreak and rage that had become her constant companions. Her phone sat silent on the coffee table. She'd turned it back on yesterday, hoping against hope for some message from Marcus, some sign that he didn't believe Vivian's lies. But there had been nothing except the usual spam texts and a worried message from Sarah asking if she was okay. A sound in the hallway made her tense. Footsteps, but not the familiar rhythm of her neighbors. These were deliberately quiet, stealthy. Arya held her breath, listening. The footsteps stopped outside her door. For a moment, there was only silence. Then she heard something that made her blood turn to ice, a soft scratching sound like claws on wood. Arya's heart hammered as she carefully stood, still holding Rosie. The baby stirred but didn't wake. Moving as quietly as possible, Arya made her way to the door and looked through the peephole. The hallway appeared empty, but something was wrong with the lighting. The fluorescent bulbs flickered erratically, casting shifting shadows that seemed to move independently of any light source. Another scratch, this time lower on the door. Arya backed away, her mind racing. She thought about calling 911, but what would she tell them? That she heard scratching? That the hallway lights were acting strange? That she was terrified because her ex-boyfriend was a werewolf and someone had been taking photos of them? A low growl emanated from somewhere beyond her door, so deep and threatening that it seemed to vibrate through the walls. Rosie woke with a startled cry, and Arya quickly bounced her, trying to keep her quiet. The growling stopped abruptly, replaced by a new sound, sniffing. Like an animal tracking a scent. Arya's hands shook as she grabbed her phone and scrolled to Marcus's number, then remembered she'd blocked it. With fumbling fingers, she tried to unblock the contact, but her ancient phone was slow to respond, the screen freezing as she navigated the settings. A violent crash from the hallway made her jump. Someone or something had just broken down Mrs. Patterson's door. The elderly woman's screams pierced the night, high and terrified, cut short with sickening abruptness. Arya clapped a hand over her mouth to stifle her own scream, her entire body trembling. Heavy footsteps moved through the hallway, accompanied by voices that seemed almost human, but carried an underlying growl that raised every instinct Arya had. "She's not here," one voice said. "But her scent is strong." "Close. Check every door," another replied. The alpha was very specific: eliminate the obstacle before tomorrow's ceremony. Ceremony. Tomorrow. Arya's blood turned to ice as she realized what they were talking about. Marcus's mating ceremony with Vivian was tomorrow, and these creatures had been sent to make sure she couldn't interfere. But she wasn't planning to interfere. She'd already walked away, already sacrificed her happiness for his safety. Why were they here? Unless Vivian wanted to make sure there was no chance of Arya ever changing her mind. No chance of the truth coming out. The footsteps stopped outside her door again. This time, the scratching was more aggressive, purposeful. They were testing the wood, looking for weak points. Arya backed toward her bedroom, clutching Rosie tightly. Her phone finally responded, Marcus's contact information appearing on the screen. But before she could call, her apartment door exploded inward. 3 figures filled the doorway, and Arya's mind struggled to process what she was seeing. They were human-shaped but wrong somehow. Too tall, too broad, with eyes that reflected the dim light like an animal's. Their faces were partially shifted, showing elongated teeth and distorted features that belonged in nightmares. "There she is," the largest one said, his voice a mixture of human speech and bestial growl. "And the little mongrel." Arya ran. She bolted for her bedroom, slamming the door behind her and frantically turning the lock. It wouldn't hold them for long, but maybe long enough to. The window. Her fire escape. With Rosie clutched against her chest, Arya threw open her bedroom window and crawled onto the metal platform outside. The December air was bitter cold, and Rosie immediately began crying at the temperature change. Arya tried to quiet her as she fumbled with her phone, finally managing to dial Marcus's number. It went straight to voicemail. Behind her, something massive hit her bedroom door with enough force to crack the wood. Another impact, and she heard the frame splinter. Arya climbed down the fire escape as quickly as she dared, her bare feet already numb on the frozen metal. She'd made it to the second-floor landing when her bedroom window exploded outward, sending glass raining down around her. One of the creatures leaned out the window, its partially shifted features twisted in a snarl. When it saw her on the fire escape, it smiled, showing far too many teeth. Nowhere to run, little Omega. It began climbing out the window with fluid, inhuman grace. Arya didn't wait to see more. She half fell down the remaining flights, her phone clutched in one hand while she used the other to shield Rosie from the metal railings and her own stumbling descent. She hit the alley behind her building at a run, her bare feet slipping on the icy pavement. Behind her, she could hear the creatures giving chase, their claws scraping against the fire escape as they descended. The alley was a dead end. Arya spun around, her back against the brick wall of the neighboring building, as three impossibly large figures dropped from the fire escape and stalked toward her. In the dim light from the street lamps, she could see them more clearly now. They were definitely human, but wrong, as if someone had taken people and stretched them into something predatory and unnatural. "Please," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Don't hurt my baby." "The child is half human," the leader said conversationally, as if discussing the weather. "She'll never shift, never be a threat. We have no orders regarding her specifically. But you do have orders regarding me. Nothing personal. You're just inconvenient." The creature lunged. Arya screamed and threw herself sideways, clutching Rosie protectively. She hit the ground hard, her shoulder scraping against the rough brick wall, but managed to keep her grip on her daughter. The creature's claws raked across her back, shredding her thin nightshirt and sending lines of fire across her skin. Arya rolled and tried to scramble away, but there was nowhere to go. She was going to die in this alley. Rosie was going to. A roar shattered the night. Not human, not even close to human. This was the sound of something massive and furious and utterly wild. The creatures stalking Arya froze, their heads turning toward the mouth of the alley. Marcus stepped into view, and Arya's breath caught. Even in human form, he radiated power and barely contained violence. His golden eyes blazed with an inner fire, and when he spoke, his voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. "Get away from her." The leader of the attacking creatures straightened, showing no fear despite the obvious threat Marcus represented. "Alpha Cain, you're supposed to be preparing for tomorrow's ceremony. And you're supposed to be dead." Marcus took another step forward, and Arya could see his human facade beginning to crack. His movements were too fluid, too predatory, and shadows seemed to ripple around him like living things. "I'll give you one chance to explain why you're threatening my—" He stopped, the word hanging unfinished in the air. But Arya heard it anyway, felt it resonate in her chest like a struck bell. "Mine? You're what?" the creature taunted. "Your discarded human pet? Vivian told us all about how she rejected you once she learned what you really are. Face it, Cain, she's nothing to you now." Marcus's laugh was cold and deadly. "Is that what Vivian told you?" "Among other things. She said you needed help, cleaning up loose ends before the ceremony." "Did she?" Marcus's smile was sharp as a blade. "And you believed her?" Something in his tone must have finally penetrated the creature's confidence. The leader shifted slightly, uncertainty flickering across his distorted features. "She showed us the orders. Let me show you something better." Marcus began to change. Arya had seen his transformation before, on her apartment roof, but this was different. This wasn't the controlled, almost gentle shift she'd witnessed that night. This was raw power unleashing itself, predatory instinct given physical form. His clothes tore away as his body expanded, muscles and bone reforming with fluid precision. Dark fur erupted across his skin as his face elongated into a muzzle filled with gleaming teeth. His hands became massive paws tipped with claws that could shred steel. In seconds, where a man had stood, there was now a wolf the size of a small horse. Marcus's wolf form was magnificent and terrifying. Black fur shot through with silver, eyes that burned like golden flames, presence that commanded submission from every living thing in his vicinity. The attacking creatures stumbled backward, their earlier confidence evaporating. Arya could smell their fear, sharp and acrid in the cold air. Alpha, one of them stammered. We were told. Marcus's growl cut off the explanation. The sound was so deep, so primal, that Arya felt it in her bones. The baby in her arms had gone completely silent, not from fear but from some instinct that told her to be still in the presence of an apex predator. The largest of the creatures, the one who had called her a little Omega, tried to run. Marcus was on him before he'd taken 3 steps. What followed was swift and brutal. The creature's scream cut through the night, then went silent. The other 2 tried to scatter in different directions, but Marcus moved with impossible speed, shadows and fury given form. In less than a minute, it was over. Marcus stood in the center of the alley, no longer fully wolf, but not entirely human either. Blood stained his hands that had been paused moments before, and his eyes still burned with that inhuman fire. But when he looked at Arya, his expression gentled. Are you hurt? Arya shook her head, not trusting her voice. She was hurt. Her back burned where the creature's claws had caught her. But seeing Marcus safe and whole was more important than physical pain. Marcus approached slowly, giving her time to adjust to his presence. When he reached her, he crouched down so they were at eye level. Arya, I need you to listen to me very carefully. These weren't random rogues. Someone sent them specifically to hurt you. She nodded, still cradling Rosie protectively. Which means you're not safe here. You're not safe anywhere, as long as whoever ordered this attack thinks you're a threat. Marcus's jaw tightened. I'm going to get you somewhere secure, and then I'm going to find out who's responsible. I know who, Arya wanted to say, but the words stuck in her throat. Instead, she pulled out her phone and typed, Vivian. Marcus went very still. What about Vivian? She came to the diner. Threatened me. Said I had to stay away from you, or Rosie would be in danger. She what? The temperature in the alley seemed to drop 10 degrees, as Marcus's control slipped again. When? 3 days ago. The day I blocked your number. Understanding dawned in Marcus's golden eyes, followed by a rage so profound that Arya actually felt it like heat radiating from his skin. She manipulated you. Made you think you had to choose between me and Rosie's safety. Arya nodded, tears starting to fall. And I believed her when she said you'd rejected me. Marcus's voice was rough with self-recrimination. I should have known. I should have felt. He stopped, his head tilting as if he'd heard something. We need to move. Now. Marcus stood and offered her his hand. More are coming. Arya could hear it too now. The distant sound of engines, multiple vehicles moving through the night with purpose. My car is 2 blocks away, Marcus said as he helped her to her feet. Can you run? Arya nodded, even though her bare feet were numb with cold and her back was on fire from the claw marks. Marcus shrugged out of his jacket. Somehow he was fully clothed again, though she hadn't seen him dress, and wrapped it around her shoulders. They ran through back alleys and side streets, Marcus leading the way with sure confidence while Arya struggled to keep up. Rosie had fallen asleep again, lulled by the rhythmic motion, but Arya could feel her own strength flagging. Marcus's car was exactly where he'd said it would be, a sleek black SUV that looked like it could survive a military assault. He had the engine running, and the heat turned up before Arya had even finished buckling Rosie into the car seat he somehow had ready in the back. Where are we going? Arya asked as they pulled into traffic. Somewhere safe. Somewhere Vivian can't touch you. Marcus's knuckles were white on the steering wheel. And then I'm going to have a very serious conversation with my intended mate. The ceremony is tomorrow. No, it's not. Arya stared at him. What do you mean? I mean the ceremony is off. The alliance is off. Everything is off. Marcus's voice was deadly calm. Vivian Blackwood just made the biggest mistake of her very long life. But the Pack Council will support my decision once they learn that my intended mate hired mercenaries to murder humans under my protection. Marcus glanced at her in the rearview mirror. That's a declaration of war, Arya. And I don't negotiate with people who threaten what's mine. There was that word again. Mine. It sent warmth spreading through Arya's chest despite everything that had happened. What happens now? Marcus was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was soft but carried absolute conviction. Now I choose you. I choose Rosie. I choose the life I want instead of the life everyone else expects me to have. He met her eyes in the mirror. If you'll have me. If you can forgive me for not seeing through Vivian's lies, for letting you believe you had to face this alone. Arya's throat closed up with emotion. 3 days ago, she'd thought she'd lost him forever. Now he was here, he'd saved their lives, he was offering her everything she'd dreamed of but been too afraid to hope for. "Are you sure?" she typed. "This will change everything for you. Your pack, your position. My pack will adapt. My position means nothing if I can't protect the people I love." Marcus's golden eyes found hers again. "I love you, Arya. I love Rosie. I should have told you that weeks ago, should have made it clear that you're not just some casual relationship I can walk away from. I love you too," she typed, the words blurring as tears filled her eyes. "Then we'll figure out the rest together." Marcus reached back and squeezed her hand gently. "I promise you no one will ever threaten you or Rosie again. Not Vivian, not the Pack Council, not anyone." As they drove through the pre-dawn darkness toward an uncertain but hopeful future, Arya held her sleeping daughter and marveled at how quickly everything could change. 24 hours ago, she'd thought her story with Marcus was over. Now she realized it was just beginning. But first, there would be consequences to face. A spurned alpha female who'd just lost everything she'd schemed for. A pack council that would have to choose between political convenience and their alpha king's happiness. A supernatural world that didn't easily forgive disruptions to carefully laid plans. Marcus had chosen love over duty, but Arya knew that choice would come with a price they'd both have to pay. As the first light of dawn touched the horizon, she wondered if they were strong enough to weather the storm that was surely coming. Chapter 6. The safe house was nothing like Arya had imagined. She'd expected something remote and rustic, maybe a cabin in the woods. Instead, Marcus drove them through the gates of what looked like a small, upscale residential community nestled in the hills outside the city. Elegant homes dotted tree-lined streets, complete with sidewalks and streetlights that gave the entire area an almost suburban normalcy. "Pack housing," Marcus explained as they wound through the streets. "Most of our people live here, at least part-time. It's easier to maintain security when everyone's close." Arya counted at least 50 houses, each substantial and well-maintained. Through lit windows, she glimpsed families going about evening routines. Children doing homework, couples cooking dinner, elderly people watching television. It looked so normal that she almost forgot these weren't ordinary suburban families. Then she noticed the details that set this place apart. The too-perfect posture of a man walking his dog. The way a woman pruning roses in her front yard tracked their vehicle with predatory alertness. The children playing in one yard who moved with fluid grace that didn't look quite human. "Everyone here is?" Arya gestured vaguely. "Werewolf, yes. About 200 families in total." Marcus pulled into the driveway of a large colonial-style house. "This is the main safe house. My beta Alex lives here with his mate and kids." The front door opened before they'd even gotten out of the car, revealing a tall man with sandy hair and intelligent green eyes. He was handsome in a quieter way than Marcus, but carried himself with the same unconscious authority. "About time," Alex said, jogging down the front steps. "When you didn't show up for the pre-ceremony briefing, I started making calls." "What the hell happened?" "Vivian happened," Marcus said grimly as he helped Arya out of the passenger seat. "And we need to talk. All of us." Alex's gaze shifted to Arya and Rosie, and she saw the moment he caught their scent. His nostrils flared slightly, his expression shifting from concern to something more complex. Surprise, calculation, and what might have been recognition. "The human," he said quietly. "Her name is Arya." Marcus's voice carried a warning. "And she's under my protection." "Of course." Alex's tone became carefully neutral. "Come inside. Sarah's got dinner ready, and the kids are already asking about the baby." The interior of the house was warm and welcoming, decorated with comfortable furniture and family photos. A woman emerged from the kitchen, petite and dark-haired with laugh lines around her eyes and flour on her apron. "You must be Arya," she said with genuine warmth. "I'm Sarah, Alex's mate. And who's this little angel?" Arya fumbled for her phone, then hesitated. These people knew what she was, knew why she couldn't speak normally. The thought was both terrifying and oddly liberating. "This is Rosie," she typed. "Thank you for letting us stay." "Nonsense, your family now." Sarah's easy acceptance made Arya's chest tight with unexpected emotion. "Let me show you to your room, and then we'll get some food in all of you." As Sarah led them upstairs, chattering about the guest room and asking about Rosie's feeding schedule, Arya caught fragments of the intense conversation happening between Marcus and Alex in the living room. Ceremony was supposed to start in 6 hours. Hired mercenaries to kill her. Council's going to lose their minds. Bigger problem than we thought. The guest room was spacious and comfortable, with a crib already set up in the corner. Sarah must have prepared it while they were driving over, another sign of the pack's efficiency. The bathroom's through there, Sarah said, pointing to a connecting door. Fresh towels in the cabinet. Are you hurt? There's blood on Marcus's jacket. Arya had forgotten about the claw marks on her back. Now that Sarah mentioned them, they burned with renewed intensity. Just scratches. I'll be fine. Let me take a look. Sarah's voice brooked no argument. I was a nurse before I made it Alex. Turn around. The wounds were deeper than Arya had thought, for parallel gashes that would definitely need attention. Sarah cleaned them with gentle efficiency, applying some kind of herbal salve that immediately reduced the burning sensation. This will help them heal faster, Sarah explained as she bandaged the wounds. One of the benefits of pack life, we have access to traditional remedies that work better than human medicine. Is everyone here so welcoming? Arya typed. Sarah paused in her bandaging. Honestly, you're going to face some resistance. Marcus choosing a human mate over Vivian Blackwood. It's going to cause ripples. But anyone with sense can see how he looks at you. How does he look at me? Like you're his whole world. Sarah's smile was gentle. Like he'd burn down everything else to keep you safe. A soft knock interrupted them. Alex appeared in the doorway, his expression serious. Sorry to interrupt, but Marcus wants to brief everyone together. The kids are in bed, and we've got some pack members coming over who need to hear this. Downstairs, the living room had filled with people. Arya counted 8 adults, all of whom turned to study her with varying degrees of curiosity and wariness when she entered. She recognized the look, the same assessment she'd gotten from customers at the diner, the same calculation of her worth based on her obvious disadvantages. Marcus stood immediately when he saw her, crossing the room to put a protective arm around her shoulders. The gesture wasn't lost on anyone present. Everyone, this is Arya Thorne and her daughter Rosie, Marcus said, his voice carrying alpha authority. They're under pack protection. A woman with silver-streaked hair and sharp blue eyes stepped forward. Elena Winters, pack council member. Her tone was polite but cool. We need to discuss the implications of tonight's events. Marcus guided Arya to the couch, keeping her close as the group settled into chairs around the room. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. First, Marcus began, the mating ceremony is cancelled. Permanently. The reaction was immediate. Several people started talking at once, voices raised in alarm and objection. Elena held up a hand for silence. Marcus, you can't just. I can and I did. Marcus's voice cut through the protests. Vivian Blackwood hired mercenaries to murder Arya and her child. That's a declaration of war against our pack. You have proof of this? Elena's skepticism was obvious. Alex pulled out a tablet, swiping through what appeared to be surveillance footage. The attack was recorded by security cameras in the alley. 3 rogues, clearly coordinating, targeting a specific human female and child. The lead attacker mentioned orders from the Alpha regarding eliminating an obstacle before the ceremony. The room went quiet as Alex played the footage. Arya forced herself to watch, seeing her own terror replayed on the screen. Marcus's transformation, the swift and brutal justice that followed. The rogues? Elena asked. Dead. All 3. Marcus's tone was flat. But not before one of them confirmed they were hired by Vivian. A younger man with dark hair leaned forward. Even if that's true, breaking the alliance will have consequences. The Blackwood pack won't take this lying down. Let them try, Marcus said coldly. Any pack that targets innocent humans under my protection forfeits the right to alliance with us. But she's not innocent, is she? Elena's gaze fixed on Arya with laser intensity. She's an Omega, unmated, with a child of unknown parentage. Do you have any idea what kind of political complications this creates? Arya felt heat flood her cheeks at the clinical assessment. She was being discussed like a problem to be solved, a threat to be managed. Marcus's arm tightened around her. Elena! No, let me speak. Arya's voice came out as barely more than a whisper, but in the quiet room, everyone heard her. You want to know about complications? I've been living with them my whole life. She pulled out her phone, typing rapidly. I know I'm not what you expected. I know I'm not sophisticated or powerful or politically useful. But I didn't ask for any of this. I was just trying to raise my daughter and survive. Elena read the message, her expression softening slightly. Marcus chose me, Arya continued typing. I didn't manipulate him or trap him. If anything, I tried to walk away to protect him. So if you want to blame someone for disrupting your plans, blame the woman who hired killers to murder a mother and child. The room was silent for a long moment. Then Elena nodded slowly. You're right. I apologize. The situation has us all on edge. She looked around the room. But we still need to address the larger issue. The Blackwood alliance was crucial to our territory agreements. Without it, we'll manage, Marcus said firmly. We always have. Alex cleared his throat. Actually, there's something else. I've been digging into Vivian's communications since Marcus called me tonight. What we found suggests this goes deeper than a spurned woman's revenge. He pulled up a series of documents on his tablet. Financial transfers from the Eastern Pact to known mercenary groups. Not just the 3 who attacked tonight. We're talking about a small army. Equipment purchases. Safe house rentals across our territory. Elena's face had gone pale. How long has this been going on? At least 6 months. Maybe longer. Alex looked grim. This wasn't about forcing Marcus into the mating ceremony. This was preparation for a hostile takeover. Marcus was very still beside Arya. Explain. Think about it. Vivian marries you, becomes your queen, gains access to all our pack's secrets and security protocols. Meanwhile, her father's been positioning mercenaries throughout our territory. Once she's established as your mate, they move. Eliminate key pack leaders, claim it's a rogue attack, and the Eastern Pack swoops in to help maintain order. A coup, Elena breathed. They were planning a coup. Using the mating alliance as a Trojan horse, Alex confirmed. The attack tonight wasn't about eliminating a romantic rival. It was about eliminating a witness who might have complicated their timeline. Arya felt sick. Because I saw through Vivian's lies. Because Marcus chose me over her. Exactly. Alex's expression was grim. You became a problem they needed to solve before moving to the next phase. The implications hung heavy in the air. If Arya and Marcus hadn't found each other, if he'd gone through with the ceremony tomorrow, the entire Northern Pack would have been walking into a trap. We need to contact the other packs, Elena said, already reaching for her phone. Warn them what the Blackwoods are planning. Agreed. But first, we need to make sure Arya and Rosie are completely safe. Marcus looked around the room. I want full security on this house. No one in or out without clearance. A soft cry from upstairs interrupted the tactical discussion. Rosie was waking up, probably hungry and confused by the unfamiliar surroundings. I'll get her, Arya signed, standing carefully. Her back was still sore from the claw marks. I'll come with you, Sarah offered. In case you need anything. As they headed upstairs, Arya could hear the men launching into detailed security discussions. The weight of what she'd learned pressed down on her. She and Rosie hadn't just been caught in the crossfire of supernatural politics, they'd been the key to preventing a war. Rosie was indeed hungry, fussing in the unfamiliar crib. As Arya prepared a bottle, Sarah watched with the observant eye of an experienced mother. She's a beautiful baby, Sarah said softly. Strong too. I can already see it in the way she moves. She's everything to me. Of course she is. But Arya, has anyone ever told you that Rosie shows alpha traits? Arya paused in testing the bottle's temperature. What do you mean? The way she grips your finger, stronger than most human babies. Her alertness, her focus. The way she settled when Marcus held her that first night, like she recognized his authority. Sarah's expression was careful. It's subtle, but those of us with pack experience know what to look for. But she's half human. Yes, but her father. Sarah hesitated. Arya, do you know anything about Rosie's father? His background, his family? Arya's hands shook as she picked up her phone. Why are you asking? Because if Rosie is showing alpha genetics this early, her father wasn't just any werewolf. He was high-ranking, possibly from a major bloodline. The room seemed to spin slightly. Arya sank into the rocking chair, holding Rosie close. I don't know much about him. We only dated for a few weeks. He said his name was Derek, that he was from out of town. When I told him I was pregnant, he disappeared. Derek. Sarah's face had gone very pale. Arya, what did he look like? Tall, blonde hair, blue eyes. Very handsome. Charming. He had this way of making you feel like you were the only person in the room. Sarah's reaction was immediate and alarming. She grabbed Arya's phone, typing rapidly. I need to get Marcus. Right now. What's wrong? But Sarah was already at the door, calling downstairs in a voice tight with urgency. Marcus. Alex. You need to get up here. Now. Heavy footsteps pounded up the stairs. Marcus appeared in the doorway, followed by Alex and Elena, all of them radiating tension. What is it? Marcus asked. Sarah looked at Arya, then at Rosie sleeping peacefully in her mother's arms. I think I know who Rosie's father was. The silence that followed was deafening. Based on Arya's description and the timing, Derek Blackwood, Vivian's younger brother. Elena's sharp intake of breath was audible. Derek Blackwood died 18 months ago, killed by rogues near the Canadian border. 18 months ago, Alex said slowly, which would make the timing exactly right. Marcus was staring at Rosie with an expression of dawning understanding. If Derek was her father, then Rosie is Vivian's niece, Elena finished. And as Derek's daughter, she's heir to a significant portion of the Eastern Pact's territory and resources. Arya's world tilted on its axis. What are you saying? Marcus knelt beside her chair, his golden eyes gentle but serious. I'm saying your daughter isn't just any half-werewolf child. She's Eastern Pact royalty. And that changes everything. The Blackwoods don't know, Alex said, his voice thoughtful. If they did, they would never have ordered her death. She's too valuable. But they will know eventually, Elena warned. Especially once she starts manifesting more obvious supernatural traits. A female alpha heir is incredibly rare and powerful. Arya looked down at her innocent daughter, this perfect little being she'd been struggling to raise alone. What does this mean for us? It means, Marcus said carefully, that Rosie is now one of the most important children in the supernatural world. And it means the people who tried to kill you tonight are going to be very interested in keeping this secret buried. Or, Elena added ominously, in eliminating the witnesses before the truth can complicate their plans further. As if sensing the gravity of the conversation around her, Rosie stirred in Arya's arms, her tiny hand reaching up to grasp her mother's finger with surprising strength. In that moment, Arya saw it, the alpha trait Sarah had mentioned. The determined grip, the alert intelligence in those baby eyes that seemed to see more than they should. Her daughter. Derek's daughter. Vivian's niece. Eastern Pact heir. And now, more than ever, a target for forces Arya was only beginning to understand. What do we do? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. Marcus's hand covered hers, warm and steady. We protect her. We protect both of you. Whatever it takes. But as Arya looked around the room at the worried faces of the pack members, she couldn't shake the feeling that protecting Rosie was going to require more than just physical security. It was going to require navigating a supernatural political landscape where her daughter was simultaneously the most valuable and most dangerous child alive. And Arya had no idea if she was strong enough for what was coming. Chapter 7. The summons came at dawn. Arya woke to urgent voices downstairs and the sound of vehicles arriving in the driveway. Through the guest room window, she could see black SUVs with tinted windows, their occupants remaining hidden, but their presence unmistakably threatening. Marcus appeared in the doorway, already dressed in what she was beginning to recognize as his Alpha King attire. A perfectly tailored black suit that somehow managed to look both elegant and dangerous. We have visitors, he said grimly. Eastern Pact delegation. They're here for Rosie. Arya's blood turned to ice. She looked at her daughter, still sleeping peacefully in the crib, oblivious to the storm gathering around her tiny existence. How do they know? Someone talked. Word travels fast in our world. Marcus moved to the window, his body tense as he watched the vehicles. Thorne's out there. Vivian's father. He's demanding a formal hearing. Arya grabbed her phone with shaking hands. What kind of hearing? The kind where he presents his claim for custody of his granddaughter. Marcus's jaw was tight with controlled fury. According to Eastern Pact law, blood relatives have rights to Pact children, especially alpha heirs. Over my dead body. That might be exactly what he's counting on. Marcus turned from the window, his golden eyes blazing. Arya, I need you to understand something. What happens next? It's going to get ugly. There are laws, traditions, protocols that govern these situations. And most of them weren't written with human mothers in mind. A soft knock interrupted them. Alex appeared, his expression grave. They're requesting formal assembly. Full pack witness, neutral arbiter. It's all very official. He looked at Arya with something like pity. They've brought documentation. Genealogy records, territory claims, the works. They're not messing around. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, his mind clearly racing through options. Finally, he nodded. Tell them we'll assemble in 1 hour. Send word to our allies. I want every available pack leader here. If Thorne wants to play politics, he's going to face the full Northern Territories Council. As Alex left to make arrangements, Marcus sat on the edge of the bed, running his hands through his dark hair. There's something else you need to know, he said quietly. If this goes badly, if the arbitration doesn't go our way, Thorne has the legal right to challenge me directly for custody. Alpha combat. Winner takes all. Including me? Including you. If I lose. Marcus's voice was rough. If I lose, you and Rosie become part of the Eastern Pack. Under Thorn's authority, Arya felt like the world was tilting beneath her feet. Everything they'd fought for, everything they'd found together, could be stripped away by ancient laws she didn't understand. Then don't lose. Marcus's smile was grim but determined. I don't plan to. An hour later, Arya found herself in the largest gathering space she'd ever seen. A massive hall that looked like it had been designed specifically for pack meetings. Tiered seating rose on 3 sides, with a central floor area that reminded her uncomfortably of a gladiatorial arena. The Northern Pack had turned out in force. Arya counted over 100 werewolves, all watching the proceedings with intense interest. On one side sat the Eastern Pack delegation, 12 individuals in expensive suits, their cold eyes fixed on her and Rosie with predatory calculation. At their head sat Thomas Thorn, Vivian's father. He was a large man in his 60s, with steel-gray hair and the kind of commanding presence that demanded attention. When he looked at Rosie, sleeping in Arya's arms, oblivious to the chaos around her, his expression was one of ownership, as if he were appraising valuable property. Beside him sat Vivian herself, looking as perfectly composed as ever. But Arya caught the subtle tension in her posture, the way her manicured fingers gripped the arms of her chair just a little too tightly. This wasn't going according to her original plan, and she wasn't pleased about it. A neutral arbiter had been brought in, an elderly female alpha from the Western Territories named Margaret Clearwater. Her silver hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and her pale eyes missed nothing as she surveyed the assembled crowd. "We are here," Margaret announced in a voice that carried easily through the hall, "to hear the formal claim of Thomas Thorn regarding the custody of Rose Thorn, daughter of Derek Blackwood, deceased son of the Eastern Pack." The formal language made Arya's daughter sound like a legal document rather than a living child. Rosie stirred in her arms, and Arya instinctively held her closer. Thomas Thorn stood, his presence commanding immediate attention. "Honored arbiter, I come before this assembly to claim my granddaughter, the daughter of my beloved son Derek. According to the laws that have governed our kind for centuries, blood relatives have both the right and the responsibility to raise pack children within their proper heritage." His voice was smooth, practiced. This wasn't his first custody battle. Rose Blackwood is not merely pack-born. She is alpha-born, heir to significant territory and resources within the Eastern Pack. She belongs with her blood family, learning the ways of her people, preparing for the responsibilities that await her. Margaret nodded. "And the child's mother?" "A human." Thomas's tone made the word sound like something distasteful. "While we harbor no ill will toward Miss Thorn, she cannot provide the guidance and training that an alpha heir requires. She knows nothing of our laws, our traditions, our ways. How can she prepare the child for a life she doesn't understand?" Murmurs rippled through the assembly. Arya could feel the weight of 100 gazes, most of them agreeing with Thomas's assessment. She was human. She was ignorant. She was inadequate. Marcus stood to respond, his presence immediately commanding attention in the way that only true alphas could manage. "Honored arbiter, while I respect the traditions that guide us, I cannot accept the premise that biology alone determines fitness to parent. Arya Thorn has raised her daughter with love, dedication, and sacrifice. She has protected Rose at the cost of her own safety and comfort." His voice carried absolute conviction. "Moreover, Rose is currently under the protection of the Northern Pack, as are all children within our territory. Any custody arrangement must be approved by the Pack leadership, specifically by me." Thomas's smile was cold. "And therein lies the problem, doesn't it? You've compromised your judgment by becoming emotionally involved with the child's mother. Can this assembly truly trust that you're acting in Rose's best interests rather than pursuing your own romantic entanglements?" The accusation hit like a slap. Arya saw several Pack members exchange glances, doubt flickering in their expressions. "Furthermore," Thomas continued, "there are questions about the circumstances surrounding my son's relationship with Miss Thorn. Derek was killed before he could fulfill his responsibilities to his child. It's possible he never even knew she existed." "Liar," Arya thought fiercely. Derek had known. He'd run when she told him, but he'd known. Marcus's voice turned dangerous. "Are you suggesting that Arya is lying about her daughter's parentage?" "I'm suggesting that without proper DNA verification, we're taking the word of a woman who has already demonstrated a willingness to manipulate alphas for her own gain." The insult hung in the air like a challenge. Arya felt heat flood her face, rage and humiliation warring in her chest. Every cruel thing Vivian had said to her in the diner came rushing back. Pathetic mute Omega, could never be queen, walking pheromone factory. Before Marcus could respond, Vivian stood gracefully. If I may, honored arbiter, I'd like to address the assembly. Margaret nodded her permission. I knew Derek better than anyone here, Vivian said, her voice carrying just the right note of grief. We were very close, and he told me about his relationships. If he had fathered a child, I would have known about it. Another lie. Arya could see it in the way Vivian's eyes flickered away from direct contact, in the subtle tension around her mouth. Moreover, Vivian continued, the child shows no definitive signs of Blackwood heritage. She could be the daughter of any alpha, or even a particularly strong beta. Without DNA confirmation, this entire proceeding is based on speculation and wishful thinking. The doubt in the room was becoming palpable. Arya could feel support slipping away, CPAC members who had been neutral beginning to side with the Eastern delegation. Margaret looked around the assembly. Are there any who can verify the child's parentage? Silence stretched through the hall. Arya realized with growing despair that she had no proof beyond her own word, and her word as a human carried little weight in this supernatural court. Then Sarah stood up. I can verify certain aspects of the timeline, she said clearly. And I can confirm that the child shows strong alpha genetics. Stronger than would be expected from a random mating. It was something, but Arya could tell it wasn't enough. The Eastern Pack had come prepared with lawyers and documentation and centuries of precedent. She had nothing but her love for her daughter and the word of people who barely knew her. Thomas seemed to sense victory. Honored arbiter, I believe the evidence speaks for itself. The child belongs with her blood family, learning her proper heritage. I'm prepared to take custody immediately. Over my dead body, Marcus said quietly, but his words carried to every corner of the hall. Thomas's smile was triumphant. That can be arranged. The formal challenge was issued with ancient ritual. Thomas stood in the center of the assembly floor, his voice carrying centuries of tradition and law. Marcus Kane, Alpha of the Northern Territories, I challenge your right to interfere in Eastern Pack family matters. I challenge your authority over my granddaughter. Combat will determine whose claim is just. Margaret stood, her expression grave. The challenge has been issued and heard. Marcus Kane, do you accept? Marcus was already moving toward the center of the floor. I accept. The assembly erupted in voices, some excited, others worried, all understanding that they were about to witness something that would reshape the balance of power between the two packs. Traditional combat, Margaret announced. Shifted form. First blood or submission determines the winner. As the two alphas began preparing for the challenge, removing their jackets and rolling up their sleeves, Arya found herself studying the Eastern Pack delegation. Something was bothering her, a nagging sense that she was missing something important. That's when she noticed Vivian's behavior. While everyone else was focused on the impending fight, Vivian was texting. Quick, furtive messages that she immediately deleted. Her eyes kept darting toward the exits, and she was sitting forward in her chair as if ready to move quickly. Arya's stomach dropped as she realized what she was seeing. Vivian wasn't here to support her father's custody claim. She was here to make sure Marcus didn't survive the challenge. Marcus, she thought desperately, wishing she could warn him somehow. To her shock, Marcus's head turned slightly toward her, as if he'd heard something. Marcus, can you hear me? This time, his golden eyes found hers across the hall, and she saw recognition there. Somehow, impossibly, her thoughts were reaching him. Vivian, she thought as clearly as she could. She's planning something. Watch for cheating. Marcus's almost imperceptible nod told her he'd received the message. The two alphas had stripped to the waist now, their muscular frames drawing appreciative murmurs from the crowd. Thomas was larger, older, with the thick build of someone who'd fought many battles. Marcus was faster, more fluid, but Arya could see the calculation in Thomas's eyes. He'd done this before. Many times. The transformation began. Both men began to shift simultaneously, their human forms blurring and expanding as they took on their wolf shapes. Thomas became a massive gray wolf, easily the largest Arya had ever seen. His yellow eyes held cunning and malicious intelligence. Marcus's wolf was smaller but more elegant, the same black fur she remembered from that night on the roof. But she could see the power in his movement, the predatory grace that marked him as an apex predator. They circled each other in the center of the floor, growls rumbling deep in their chests. The assembly had gone completely silent, everyone focused on the ancient dance of dominance playing out before them. Thomas struck first, lunging with surprising speed for such a large wolf. Marcus dodged, his smaller size allowing him to slip away from the attack, but not before Thomas's claws caught his shoulder, drawing the first blood. The crowd murmured. First blood didn't end the fight, but it was a psychological victory for the challenger. He's trying to tire you out, Arya thought desperately. He wants you exhausted before he makes his real move. Marcus's wolf form couldn't nod, but she felt his acknowledgement through their strange connection. The fight continued, a brutal display of supernatural strength and speed. Both wolves were bleeding now, their fur matted with blood and saliva. Thomas was indeed trying to wear Marcus down, using his superior size and reach to force the younger alpha to expend energy dodging and weaving. But Marcus was learning his opponent's patterns, finding openings, landing increasingly solid hits. That's when Arya saw Vivian stand up and walk casually toward the exit, her phone out again. She's leaving, Arya thought urgently. Right now. Something's about to happen. Marcus managed to get behind Thomas, his teeth finding the older wolf's back leg. Thomas howled in pain and fury, spinning to shake him off. That's when Arya saw the gleam of metal. Hidden in Thomas's thick fur, almost invisible unless you knew where to look, was a thin silver blade. Not large enough to be immediately lethal, but sharp enough to do serious damage to another werewolf. Silver was poison to their kind. Even a small wound could be fatal if left untreated. Silver! Arya's mental scream was so loud that Marcus actually stumbled, momentarily stunned by the force of her warning. He has silver. Back leg, hidden in his fur. Marcus rolled away just as Thomas lunged, the hidden blade missing him by inches. The crowd erupted in outrage as they realized what had happened. Cheating in a formal challenge was not just dishonorable, it was a capital crime. But Thomas wasn't finished. As Margaret rose to stop the fight and declare Marcus the winner by forfeit, Thomas pulled something else from his fur. A small silver dart, the kind used in tranquilizer guns. He was going to try to poison Marcus even after being caught cheating. Arya didn't think. She didn't plan. She just acted. Rising from her seat, still holding Rosie, she walked into the challenge circle. Her voice, unused for so many years, cracked and broke as she forced out the words that would change everything. I challenge for the right to protect my daughter. The hall went dead silent. Every eye turned to her, the mute human woman who had just done the impossible. She had found her voice. Thomas, still in wolf form, turned to stare at her. In his yellow eyes she saw shock, rage, and something that might have been fear. Margaret's voice was carefully controlled. Miss Thorne, you are human. You cannot issue challenges under pack law. Arya's voice grew stronger with each word, years of suppressed speech pouring out in a torrent of determination and maternal fury. My daughter is pack-born. I am her mother. I carry her alpha father's scent, his claim, his protection. She looked around the assembly, meeting every gaze that had dismissed her as weak, as inadequate, as insignificant. I may be human, but I am not defenseless. And I will not let anyone take my child. Marcus, back in human form now, stared at her in amazement. Arya. No, she said firmly, her voice gaining power and certainty. This ends now. Thomas Thorne, you cheated in formal combat. You brought weapons into a sacred challenge. You have forfeited any right to my daughter. She turned to address the entire assembly, her voice carrying to every corner of the hall. I don't know your laws or your traditions. I can't shift or fight with supernatural strength. But I know love. I know sacrifice. I know what it means to put your child's welfare above everything else in the world. Rosie had woken during her mother's speech, staring up at Arya with wide, alert eyes. Not crying, not fussing, listening, as if she understood that this moment would define both their futures. I have raised Rose with nothing but love and determination. I have protected her, provided for her, sacrificed everything to give her the best life I could manage. And I will continue to do so, regardless of what any court or council or tradition says about my fitness as a mother. Thomas had shifted back to human form, blood streaming from multiple wounds. His face was twisted with rage. You think your pretty speech changes anything? You think sentiment matters in the face of law? I think, Arya said quietly, that love matters more than law. And I think your granddaughter deserves better than a family that hires assassins and cheats in sacred challenges. Margaret looked around the assembly, clearly struggling with a situation that had no precedent in pack law. This is highly irregular. Challenges cannot be issued by humans. But, she paused, her pale eyes thoughtful. The mother of a pack child does have certain rights under our oldest laws. Rights that predate many of our current traditions. Hope flickered in Arya's chest. However, Margaret continued, Those rights must be validated through proper channels. And the question of the child's parentage still remains unresolved. Thomas smiled, sensing victory again despite his humiliation in the challenge circle. Exactly. Without proof. I have proof. The voice came from the back of the hall. Every head turned to see a figure walking down the center aisle. An elderly man with white hair and kind eyes that looked remarkably familiar. I am Dr. Henry Blackwood, he announced. Thomas's brother. Derek's uncle. He stopped in front of the assembly, his gaze moving from Thomas to Rosie to Arya. And I can confirm that Rose is indeed Derek's daughter. I have DNA samples from Derek's medical records, and I've already run the comparison. He pulled out an official-looking document. 99.7% probability of paternity. There is no doubt. Thomas's face had gone pale. Henry, what are you? What I should have done months ago, Henry said firmly. Derek told me about Arya before he died. He was planning to come back for her, to do the right thing. He would never have abandoned his daughter if he'd lived. The revelation hit the assembly like a thunderclap. Not only was Rosie definitively Derek's daughter, but Derek had intended to claim both her and Arya. Moreover, Henry continued, I have disturbing evidence about the circumstances of Derek's death. Evidence that suggests he wasn't killed by random rogues, but by hired assassins. Assassins paid for by someone who wanted him silenced before he could reveal certain uncomfortable truths. His gaze fixed on Thomas with accusatory intensity. Tell me, brother, what did Derek discover about your business practices that made him such a threat? The implication hung in the air like a poison cloud. Thomas had not only cheated in the challenge, he might have murdered his own son. Arya watched the political landscape shift in real time. PAC members who had been supporting the Eastern delegation were now looking at them with suspicion and disgust. Margaret's expression had hardened into something approaching judicial wrath. In light of these revelations, Margaret announced, I declare Thomas Thorne's custody claim invalid. The challenge he issued was conducted dishonorably and is therefore void. Relief flooded through Arya so powerfully that her knees nearly gave out. Marcus was beside her in an instant, his arm around her waist, supporting her. Furthermore, Margaret continued, pending a full investigation into the allegations against Thomas Thorne, I hereby place Rose Blackwood Thorne under the protection of the Northern Pack and her mother's custody. Thomas's roar of rage was barely human. This isn't over. She's Eastern Pack blood. She belongs with us. She belongs, Arya said, her voice steady and sure, with the people who love her. As the assembly dissolved into heated discussions and political maneuvering, Arya found herself alone with Marcus for a moment, still holding her daughter. Your voice, Marcus said softly, his golden eyes bright with emotion. It came back. It was always there, Arya whispered. I just needed something important enough to fight for. Marcus leaned down and kissed her, gentle but certain, in front of the entire supernatural world. I love you, he said against her lips. Both of you. And I promise you'll never have to fight alone again. As Rosie gurgled contentedly between them, Arya realized that for the first time in her life, she truly believed in happy endings. But in the back of her mind, she couldn't forget the look in Thomas's eyes as he'd been escorted from the hall, or the way Vivian had slipped out during the chaos. This battle was won, but the war for her daughter's future was far from over. Chapter 8. Margaret Clearwater's voice cut through the chaos of the assembly hall like a blade. Ancient law has been invoked. Trial by combat for family protection. Her pale eyes fixed on Arya with something that might have been respect. The challenge is valid. Thomas Thorne's face twisted with rage. This is ridiculous. She's human. She can't possibly. She can and she has. Margaret's authority was absolute. The law is clear. A mother may fight for her child's protection when that child's life or welfare is threatened. Blood relation to pack leadership is not required. Vivian stepped forward, her perfect composure finally cracking. You can't seriously expect me to fight a human woman. It would be slaughter. Would it? Arya's voice, still gaining strength with each word, carried clearly through the hall. You seem confident for someone who's spent months manipulating others to do her dirty work. Marcus moved closer to her, his presence warm and reassuring. Through their bond, now stronger than ever since she'd found her voice, she could feel his strength, his pride, his absolute faith in her. Arya, he murmured, low enough that only she could hear. You don't have to do this. I can. No. She turned to face him fully, letting him see the determination in her eyes. This is exactly what I have to do. For Rosie. For us. For all the women who've been told they're not strong enough, not worthy enough, not enough. Margaret raised her voice again. The combat will be limited engagement. First blood or clear submission. Standard rules apply: no silver, no external weapons, no assistance from pack members. But she's human, one of the Eastern pack members protested. This is hardly fair. Life rarely is, Arya said quietly, looking directly at Vivian. Isn't that what you told me in the diner? About how I could never be queen material. Vivian's ice-blue eyes flickered with something that might have been uncertainty. For the first time since Arya had met her, the other woman looked less than perfectly composed. Very well, Vivian said, beginning to remove her expensive jacket. If the human wants to embarrass herself publicly, I'm happy to oblige. But Arya caught the subtle tells she'd learned to read during her years of silence. The way Vivian's hands trembled slightly as she folded her jacket, the too bright flush in her cheeks, the way she kept glancing toward the exits as if calculating escape routes. Vivian was afraid. The realization sent a surge of confidence through Arya. This woman who had terrorized her, who had threatened her daughter, who had orchestrated assassination attempts. She was afraid of a mute human waitress. The assembly formed a circle around the two women, creating an impromptu arena. Arya could feel hundreds of eyes on her, most expecting to witness her humiliation or worse. But when she looked at Marcus, she saw only love and unwavering support. I'm with you, his voice whispered through their bond. My strength is yours. And she could feel it, not his physical power, which would have been cheating, but his emotional strength, his absolute certainty in her capabilities flowing through their connection like warm honey. Vivian had removed her heels and stood barefoot on the polished floor, her designer dress replaced by fitted workout clothes she must have worn underneath, prepared for exactly this possibility. Any last words? Vivian taunted, beginning to circle Arya like a predator. Any final messages for your daughter before I remove the obstacle she represents to her proper upbringing? Just one, Arya said, her voice steady and clear. I know what you did to Derek. Vivian stumbled slightly, her perfect composure cracking. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't you? Arya continued circling, but she wasn't moving like prey anymore. She was moving like someone who'd spent years watching, learning, understanding the subtle dynamics of power and weakness. Derek figured out your father's plan, didn't he? The coup. The assassination plot. He was going to expose everything. Derek died in a rogue attack. Derek died because he threatened to tell Marcus about your family's real intentions. He died because he was planning to come back for me and Rosie, and that would have complicated your timeline. Arya's voice grew stronger, more confident. But most of all, he died because he figured out that you were the one feeding information to the rogues all along. The accusation hit the assembly like a thunderbolt. Gasps and angry murmurs rippled through the crowd, but Arya kept her focus on Vivian, watching for the tells that would confirm her suspicion. There, a slight widening of the eyes, a barely perceptible tightening around the mouth. Guilt and fear, quickly suppressed but not quickly enough. You're insane, Vivian said, but her voice lacked its earlier conviction. Am I? Then explain this. Arya pulled out her phone, showing the screen to the assembly. It was the original threatening photo she'd received, the one of her and Marcus on the roof. I've had weeks to study this image. Do you know what I noticed? Vivian lunged without warning, her nails extended like claws as she went for Arya's face. But Arya had been watching for exactly this move, the desperate attack of someone whose secrets were being exposed. Years of carrying heavy trays while dodging grabby customers had taught Arya to be quick on her feet. She ducked under Vivian's attack, using the other woman's momentum to send her stumbling past. The reflection in the window behind us, Arya continued, as if nothing had happened. You can just make out the photographer in the glass. Someone with long blonde hair. Someone who knew exactly where we'd be and when. Vivian spun around, her perfect features twisted with rage. Shut up. You've been planning this for months, maybe years. The coup, the assassination, all of it. But Derek started asking questions, didn't he? Started noticing the inconsistencies in the rogue attack patterns, the convenient timing of various incidents. This time when Vivian attacked, it was with the desperation of someone whose entire world was crumbling. She came in low and fast, trying to tackle Arya to the ground where her superior strength would be most effective. But Arya had spent 9 months pregnant and 11 months as a single mother. She knew how to keep her balance, how to stay upright when off balance, how to protect what mattered most. She sidestepped again, letting Vivian crash into the circle of pack members who quickly pushed her back into the center. The plan was elegant, Arya continued, her voice carrying to every corner of the hall. Marry Marcus, gain access to all pack security protocols, then orchestrate his death to look like it came from outside enemies. Chaos follows, the Eastern Pack steps in to help maintain order, and suddenly Thomas Thorne controls both territories. "Stop," Vivian whispered, her composure completely shattered now. "But I complicated things, didn't I? Marcus fell in love with me instead of going through with the arranged marriage. So you had to adapt. Make me disappear, force him back to the altar, proceed with the original timeline." Vivian's attack this time was pure desperation. She threw herself at Arya with everything she had, nails raking across Arya's arms as they went down together. They hit the floor hard, Vivian on top, her hands going for Arya's throat. For a moment, Arya felt the other woman's superior strength, the crushing pressure on her windpipe. Then Marcus's voice whispered through their bond, "You're stronger than she is. Not physically, but in every way that matters." And suddenly Arya could see it clearly, not just Vivian's physical vulnerabilities, but her emotional ones. This woman who had seemed so perfect, so untouchable, was driven by desperate insecurity. Fear of being displaced, of losing status, of not being enough. Just like Arya had been, before she found her voice. Using leverage instead of strength, Arya twisted her hips and rolled, reversing their positions. Now she was on top, pinning Vivian's arms to the floor. "But you made one crucial mistake," Arya said, her voice calm despite their struggle. "You underestimated what a mother will do to protect her child." Vivian bucked and thrashed, trying to throw Arya off, but desperation had made her sloppy. Arya held on, using her lower center of gravity and superior position to maintain control. "I have a recording," Arya announced to the assembly, even as Vivian continued to struggle beneath her. "Vivian's conversation with the mercenaries who attacked me. She kept records on her phone, probably for blackmail purposes later. It was a bluff, Arya had no such recording. But she'd learned to read people during her years of silence, and she could see in Vivian's eyes that there were indeed compromising communications somewhere. "Check her phone," Arya called out. "Check her messages, her call logs, her encrypted files. I guarantee you'll find everything you need to prove that she and her father have been planning Marcus's assassination all along." "No!" Vivian's scream was desperate, animalistic. She made one final, violent attempt to escape, her elbow catching Arya in the ribs hard enough to knock the wind out of her. But it was too late. Alex was already moving toward them, Vivian's designer purse in his hands. Within moments, he'd extracted her phone and was scrolling through its contents, his expression growing darker with each screen. "Encrypted messages to known mercenary groups," he announced to the assembly. "Financial transfers. Meeting locations. And," his voice trailed off, his face pale. "Detailed floor plans of the Alpha's private residence, including security protocols and guard rotations." The hall erupted in outrage. Even members of the Eastern Pack were looking at their delegation with disgust and betrayal. Henry Blackwood stepped forward, his face grave. "Thomas, what have you done?" Thomas Thorne tried one last desperate play. "These are fabrications. Planted evidence. You can't possibly believe." "I can and I do," Henry said firmly. "Because Derek found some of these same communications before he died. He brought them to me, asked me what to do. I told him to take them to you, to give you a chance to stop this madness." His voice broke slightly. "I never dreamed you'd have him killed instead." The confession shattered what remained of Thomas's support. Even his own pack members were stepping away from him, their expressions reflecting horror and disgust. Margaret raised her voice over the chaos. "By the evidence presented and the combat concluded, I declare Arya Thorne the victor. Thomas Thorne and Vivian Blackwood, you are charged with conspiracy, assassination, and treason against the Northern Pack. You will be held for trial by the Interpack Council." Vivian, still pinned beneath Arya, began to sob, not the elegant tears of a wronged woman, but the raw, broken sobs of someone whose entire world had just collapsed. "You don't understand," she gasped. "I loved him. I loved Marcus. Everything I did was because I loved him." "No," Arya said quietly, finally releasing the other woman and standing up. "Everything you did was because you loved yourself more. Love doesn't threaten children. Love doesn't hire assassins. Love doesn't manipulate and lie and destroy." She looked around the assembly, these people who had doubted her, dismissed her, questioned her worthiness to be among them. "I may not know your laws or your traditions," she said, her voice carrying clearly to every corner of the hall. "I may not have supernatural strength or centuries of political experience. But I know what love looks like. Real love. The kind that sacrifices for others instead of demanding sacrifice from them. Margaret stepped forward, her expression solemn but respectful. Arya Thorne, by right of combat and the ancient laws that govern us, you have proven your worthiness to protect your family and stand beside your chosen mate. The pack acknowledges your victory and your position. A cheer went up from the northern pack members, growing louder as more voices joined in. But it was Marcus's expression that mattered most to Arya, the pride and love and absolute adoration shining in his golden eyes. He stepped forward and took her in his arms, spinning her around as the cheers grew deafening. "My queen," he murmured against her ear. "My mate. My everything." And for the first time in her life, Arya truly believed she was worthy of those titles. 6 months later, the mating ceremony was nothing like the political spectacle that had been planned with Vivian. This was intimate, personal, filled with people who genuinely cared about Marcus and Arya, rather than what their union could do for various political interests. Arya stood in the bridal suite of the pack's ceremonial hall, wearing a dress that Sarah had helped her pick out. Simple, elegant, with delicate beading that caught the light when she moved. Her hair was up in a style that showcased the Luna crown she would wear as Marcus's queen, an ancient piece passed down through generations of pack leaders. "I still can't believe this is really happening," Sarah said, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. "When I dragged you to that blind date 6 months ago, I never imagined that I'd end up queen of a werewolf pack." Arya laughed, her voice still carrying the wonder of someone who'd spent most of her life silent. "I'm not sure I believe it myself." She'd made the conscious choice to use both voice and sign language in her daily life now. Years of communication through gesture and expression had taught her that words weren't the only way to convey meaning, and she wanted to honor that part of her journey. Besides, she signed to Sarah, "You did say he was a nice guy who wouldn't judge." "Understatement of the century," Sarah replied, having learned basic sign language over the past months. "Though I draw the line at learning to howl." A soft knock at the door interrupted their laughter. Alex poked his head in, grinning. "Ready for this? Marcus is about to pace a hole in the floor, and the pack elders are getting restless." Arya picked up Rosie from her carrier, marveling as always at how much her daughter had grown. 11 months old now, healthy and happy and showing more alpha traits every day. She could already pull herself up to standing, had an incredible grip strength, and seemed to understand far more than a baby her age should. "Mama," Rosie babbled, her chubby hands reaching for Arya's face. It had been her first clear word, spoken just 2 weeks ago. "That's right, baby girl. Mama's getting married today." Arya kissed her daughter's forehead, breathing in that perfect baby scent. "Are you ready to have Marcus as your official dada?" As if she understood every word, Rosie clapped her hands and made happy gurgling sounds. The ceremony itself was a blend of human tradition and ancient pack ritual. Marcus looked magnificent in his formal black suit, but it was the expression on his face when he saw Arya walking down the aisle that made her knees weak. Pure love, pure joy, pure certainty that this was exactly where they both belonged. Elena Winters, who had become something of a mentor to Arya over the past months, officiated. The vows were a mixture of traditional promises and personal words that had both of them in tears before they were halfway finished. "I promise to be your voice when you choose silence," Marcus said, his golden eyes locked on hers. "And to listen when your silence speaks louder than words." "I promise to stand beside you in all things," Arya replied, her voice steady and sure. "To be your queen, your partner, your equal in all the ways that matter." When they exchanged rings, Rosie, held by Sarah in the front row, chose that exact moment to speak her second clear word. "Dada!" The assembly erupted in laughter and cheers. Marcus's eyes filled with tears as he looked at the little girl, who was now officially his daughter, in every way that mattered. "Did you hear that?" he whispered to Arya. "She called me Dada," Arya finished, her own voice thick with emotion. "She's accepting you. Completely." The kiss that sealed their mating was gentle, reverent, full of promise for all the years to come. When they broke apart, the pack's cheers were deafening. But it was the moment afterwards, when Marcus took Rosie from Sarah's arms and the three of them stood together as a complete family, that Arya knew she'd found her true home. As the reception began, guests mingling and celebrating in the way that pack gatherings always seemed to do, with abundant food, laughter, and the kind of joy that came from genuine community. Arya found herself on the terrace with Marcus, watching Rosie play with some of the pack children. "No regrets?" Marcus asked, pulling her close against his side. "Only one," Arya said, and saw concern flicker in his eyes. "I regret that it took us so long to find each other." His smile was brilliant, We found each other exactly when we were supposed to. You needed to be strong enough to face all of this, and I needed to be worthy of your strength." They watched their daughter toddle across the grass, already showing the coordination and confidence that marked her as future pack leadership. She would grow up knowing exactly who she was, where she belonged, surrounded by people who valued her for her potential rather than dismissing her for her perceived weaknesses. Alpha Kane. They turned to see one of the pack's junior members approaching, his expression serious despite the festive atmosphere. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's a message from the Western Territories Council. They're questioning the precedent set by your mating choices. Some of the other packs are concerned about humans in leadership positions." Marcus's expression hardened slightly, but Arya squeezed his hand. "Let them be concerned," she said calmly. "Change always makes people uncomfortable. But they'll adapt, just like everyone else has." "And if they don't?" the young man asked. Arya looked out at the pack celebration, at the children playing, at the families who had welcomed her despite every reason to be suspicious. These were her people now, and she would protect them with the same fierce determination she'd always shown for Rosie. "Then they'll learn what happens when you underestimate the strength of someone who's had to fight for everything she has," she said quietly. Marcus's smile was proud and fierce. "My queen has spoken." As the sun set over their celebration, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Arya held her husband close and watched their daughter play. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new people who would question their unconventional leadership, new battles to fight for the right to love who they chose. But tonight they were exactly where they belonged, together, surrounded by family, with voices strong enough to face whatever came next. And for the first time in her life, Arya knew with absolute certainty that her story was just beginning. The end. Thank you for listening to this story. Like, share, and subscribe for more.